Like everything else, you just have to pay attention, right? But that's true here too.
Well, you're absolutely right. Depending on where you are, it certainly is true.
Hi, Melissa. Good to see you. Hi, Yvonne. Hello, Troy.
Melissa.
You there?
Hello, good to be here.
Hi, everyone.
Hi. I'm watching the clock here. We have a couple more people expected, so give it just a minute. Melissa, do you export?
Mhm. They're part of part of the District Export Council.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
I'm actually in DC right now. Just got here today for the conference.
You're going to the, oh, I look forward to hearing about that.
Yeah,
There is Simone, do you know Simona Rasic?
I don't believe so.
She's going to do a presentation on the electronic digital trade transactions, doing trade digitally without paper. And she's going to do a presentation tomorrow.
That would be fantastic. We've had lots of issues with missing documents throughout the years, so
It's amazing.
that'd be great.
And
Some of our shipping providers have gotten there and some are okay. Some are still working on it.
Yeah, well, this is it, and it's supported by the International Chamber of Commerce, you know, who does the Incoterms. So for the financial, it meets all the regulations of the banks. So cool, without the use of a letter of credit. And then, you know, what I like about it is it eliminates a lot of the communication and the miscommunication and the documentation issues.
That will be wonderful. That will be wonderful. Always a struggle.
Well, when you get back, we can talk, and that, because I work with the team that is promoting this.
Very cool. I look forward to hearing about it.
Well, sounds interesting, and I appreciate that you're joining us from Washington.
Yeah.
Well, hello, everybody. We're going to go ahead and start. Welcome to our Manufacturers Council Hour. I'm Molly Burgess from the Manufacturers Council, and we're going to have a few announcements before we get started. And I think everybody saw that we're recording this event, and you can go back and see it again on our website under past events on the events tab. And we want to take this time to recognize our major sponsors, CMTC, California Manufacturing and Technology Consulting, and Vincent's going to put their website for services and benefits in the chat box. And wanted to remind you to become a member of the MCIE if you're not already. It's an easy way to help us out, and it doesn't cost anything right now, and will allow you to receive our invitations and reminders. So there is also a link, or Vincent's going to put a link in the chat box that goes to our membership page. I wanted to give you a little bit of an update from CMTA, and that's the manufacturers lobbying arm for all of us manufacturers. Following Governor Newsom's presentation on his proposed May revision to the California state budget, Lance Hastings, who is the president and CEO of CMTA, he posted a response to the governor's budget, and he said, quote, "Reinvigorating California's middle class depends on high-paying, career-building jobs that support families. Manufacturers employ 1.2 million Californians, paying wages more than $25,000 higher than non-farm employees in the state, and year after year generate more than 10% of the state's economic output. While we appreciate Governor Newsom's acknowledging Californians' ongoing struggle with energy reliability and his commitment to pragmatic solutions, we were disappointed to see that this revision, which touts a $97.5 billion surplus, misses the mark when it comes to an opportunity that would generate incredible economic stimulation for all regions of this state. A simple change to sales tax code affecting manufacturers would not only bring more than 163,000 jobs to the state, but it would also increase California's gross state product by nearly 4 billion. Manufacturers, big and small, stepped up without hesitation when California was in dire need. It's past time the state step in for them and reinvest in this industry, the engine of innovation and top job creators for today's Californians and generations to come, end quote. So we will be sharing timely information from the CMTA, and we encourage you to consider it and perhaps take some action. So Thursday, tomorrow, the MCIE will be represented when we attend the ribbon cutting event at Victor Valley College for High Desert Training Center. We congratulate them and the High Desert Manufacturing Council for their hard work in bringing this project to fruition. And then Friday at Moreno Valley College, we are co-sponsoring an automation and robotics workshop for career and technical education partners. And then next month, we wrap up our 3-part series on transportation and supply chain. On Thursday, June 23rd, we will be continuing with the evolving future facing manufacturers as they work to get their products to market, whether it's domestic delivery or exports. So please save the date. And anytime you want to check our events, it's on our website under events, or let us know if you're not receiving emails on a regular basis. We have a manufacturer of the month. Our featured manufacturer this month is our own Manufacturers Council board member, Kusum Kavya, and her company, Combustion Associates. Kusum and her company were filmed as the first installment to CMTC's Women in Manufacturing video mini series. And Vincent, I think, is ready to roll the video for you to see.
My name is Kusum Kavya, and together with my husband, Mukund Kavya, started our business Combustion Associates, Inc. 31 years ago in the state of California. We're first-generation immigrants to this country, and we started out as an environmental engineering consulting firm. Mukund is the visionary and the engineer. I handled the business side of it, which is the accounting, the proposal writing, making sure we got paid on time, and doing all the other back-end work. Today, Combustion Associates, Inc. has 2 divisions, power and process. In the power generation side, we design and manufacture power generation systems. These are modular systems that can provide power anywhere from 1 megawatt all the way to 20 megawatt. It can power 1,000 homes and above. In the process side of the business, we actually design and build custom process skids. Over the years, we've provided many of these process systems worldwide, as well as here in the US. We love the fact that our product is shipped, says made in California, USA. California is known for innovation, and we find that our competitive advantage. What I enjoy about my role is really growing my business, and all of that really happens as a result of relationships. What I enjoy is networking events, customer interface, and really looking for ways of how do we benefit the customers that are buying our product. I love the fact that I can not only grow my business, but grow the people that are part of my team. I know that I don't know everything, and especially in a technical field like power generation systems, custom process skids. So my leadership style is listening more, taking it all in, writing notes, and then coming back with a solution that I hope really meets and addresses the customer needs, much more so than the very large businesses that just provide a cookie cutter solution. We're going after the custom solution with a long-term partnership in mind. What I love about manufacturing is you get to see the AutoCAD drawing, the design on a piece of paper, and then be able to go out there on the shop floor and actually see your product come to life and provide a benefit to the community in a way that wasn't there before. When you see that being built and you can see that it goes out from your company, it's got your brand name on it, it is a huge feeling of satisfaction Over the 30-year lifespan of our business, one project that really stands out is our project in the Republic of Benin in West Africa. This power plant that we put together for them provides national power to the grid. It provides clean energy, and it helps with the education, employment, and empowerment of that community. It was extremely challenging. We had governments that were working together on this project, and it came out to be a huge success. President Obama talked about our company at the largest African forum in Washington, D.C. That really stands out. And why does it stand out? Because we provided a benefit to that community. I would say to other women who are looking or considering manufacturing, this is your time, because there are so many incentives out there for women to get into business. Yes, it's challenging, but it's also rewarding. If you're able to put in the hard work and you know that your product or service is going to be something that the industry is looking for a solution, I would say definitely consult with the agencies that are around, like I have done over the years. Finding collaboration and partnerships really helps. And that's what women are good at. And I think that we should see more women in business. It's about leaving a legacy for your employees, for your customers, and for your suppliers.
Well, congratulations to Kasum and her company for making an impact on so many places in the world, really. They're a great example of success in California. And so now to an evolving saga facing manufacturers, supply chain disruption. I'm going to introduce Steve Harrington. He's a senior advisor for the Manufacturing Skills Standards Council and the industry liaison for the National Center for Supply Chain Automation. Steve was responsible for the development and oversight of a national industry leadership team consisting of supply chain executives and logistics industry stakeholders. In his role at the Manufacturing Skills Standards Council, he's the principal contact for innovative certified technician supply chain automation certification programs, which he developed in partnership with the industry. And Steve has 28 years of experience in supply chain operations, most recently at West Coast Logistics as manager for the Perrigo company, a Fortune 500 generic drug manufacturer. And he's past president and chairman of the Distribution Management Association of Southern California. Steve brings a lot of background and valuable experience to share with us today. And so we're thankful to you, Steve, for your time and being here. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Molly, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all today. Debbie Smith had reached out to me a couple of months ago to have obviously a background in predominantly logistics, and more recently, about the past 9 years, as industry liaison for the National Center for Supply Chain Automation. And so my presentation will be a little more, it's trends in nature, it's kind of data heavy, and it's a little more on the logistics side, recognize a lot of that has impact on manufacturers. And just in general, as a logistics person, I had a chance to tour that Kai facility a number of years ago. And as a logistics guy, it was all like, how do they actually design that and engineer it to fit inside a container to ship it across the ocean? You know, and then to transit into the middle of Africa and then to, put it together and set it up and all that. That's quite an engineering feat. So at any rate, it's all about data. And in terms of, running a manufacturing operation, looking at your data and making decisions on a day-to-day basis from that perspective. So just at the highest level, talking about the supply chain in general, and a lot of people don't understand or they might not have seen data of this sorts in terms of why the West Coast and the West Coast ports are so important to this country. But if you look at the numbers in the little square boxes are days of transit. And it's basically days of transit from Shanghai into the ports of LA and Long Beach versus other ports in other parts of the country. And you could quickly see the advantage that the West Coast has. And then on the green line, it looks like green to me, although I'm a little colorblind, is days of transit on the rail. And so if you look at, you ship into Los Angeles and then put it on a rail and go to New York, you're going to get there in 25 days. Where if you ship all the way around through the Panama Canal, it's going to take you 36 days. So in logistics in the supply chain, it's all about time, right? Time is money. Time is inventory tied up in capital's tied up in inventory. And the longer it takes for something to get there, the more difficult it is. And on top of that, of course, that time, the time constraint right now is the issue around the delays at the ports all around the country. And then there's this other high level piece that I picked up from CB Richard Ellis. It had to do with cost and cost in terms of goods moving from the Far East into the US. And there was a researcher who put out this piece called the Transportation Cost Equivalency Line. And if you look at that arrow that goes from north to south, more toward the East Coast, it's it's the breakdown or the break-even point in terms of the transition of the cost of freight going across the country versus the cost of freight coming in through East Coast ports. And you have to remember that 2/3 of the US population lives east of the Mississippi. So anyway, you know, the middle of the country is kind of bigger and wide open. But with that said, what any manufacturers, you know, supply people involved in the supply chain, they look at the two things. What does it cost and how long does it take? So those are kind of some critical elements. And then I picked this slide up more recently out of a research piece done by Savalas, is an industrial real estate tracking entity. And it shows the US and gives you some year over year numbers. And, you know, the ports were getting beat up on the national, in the national dialogue. But as it turns out, you know, you look at hindsight, and this is data from, it's kind of hard to read, it's a little smaller. But you look at like the Port of Long Beach, and this is kind of based on 2021 data compared to 2020. And the Port of Long Beach imported 15% more goods than they had the prior year. And you know, when you have a mandate by the administration which says that, you know, we're doing something about supply chain issues, you know, and then you make some mandate like the ports of LA and Long Beach are open 24 hours, that's going to help solve the problem. But in reality, that sort of declaration and that sort of just something that's kind of headline grabbing does nothing to add people, does nothing to add equipment, does nothing to add technology, does nothing to add capacity. So in the reality of all of it, with the delays as a result of the Omicron variant earlier this year, affecting, of course, ports around the country, and then in general, the ports doing the best they could with materials coming at them, I think that's quite a remarkable performance. And then if you look at the lower number, it says 11 days. Underneath Long Beach, if you can read that on the left, if your eyes are good enough, it says 11 days. That was the time that it took a ship coming into the port to get offloaded and disembark. And that obviously higher than normal. The last data that I saw involving the number of ships backed up off of the ports of LA and Long Beach was 39 in March, this past mid-March. Heck of a lot better than the 105 that were off the, of course, off the shore around the first of the year. And that's improving. But last week, BJ Patterson also talked about the issue that's going on in Shanghai. The reality is that in Shanghai, over in China, they had a total lockdown for 53 days. And of course, that's going to impact the supply chain. There were over 520 container ships of bulk cargo that were waiting to get into the ports of Shanghai and neighboring ports. And that is going to turn out to be a huge bubble that's going to be coming back the other way. As I understand it, Shanghai began to open back up in the past day or two. And at any rate, we're going to have another surge of goods coming at us. So, you know, be prepared for that. With that said, over the past, since say the first of the year, January 2022, when shipping rates across the ocean were really high, approaching $10,000 per 40-foot container, recognize that 4 or 5 years ago, it used to be about $1,600 or $1,700. You know, that of course adds a cost to any manufacturer importing goods from the Far East. That number's been coming down through April. It's down around $8,000 a container, and that should continue to trend down. In April, in general, there were 25% of all sailings across the Pacific were canceled. So, you know, with that said, there'll probably be a blip up, but the capacity has improved and increased. So that's better on the pricing front. But of course, we all know that that fuel and the cost of fuel and the cost of diesel fuel impacts everything in this country. All the consumer goods that are purchased, everything that manufacturers make and buy. You know, the cost of fuel is embedded in every good in this country. And so, of course, you know, on the West Coast here, we have our own particular extra high 50 cent per gallon premium, with diesel up over $6 a barrel. And also remember that beginning May 1st is when the federal government began releasing a million barrels a day from the strategic reserve into the pool of available oil in this country. So that's been going on now for 18 days, and it's doing nothing to bring down the price of diesel fuel. In general, the current administration is hostile to the oil and gas industry on a variety of fronts, regulatory, and of course you have Biden signed into law the first day in office was something that ceased any new leasing of federal lands for new drilling projects. So, with all that said, don't expect any relief anytime soon on the price of diesel fuel as it relates to manufacturers. Of course, you're going to continue to see surcharges, fuel surcharges, and even though the cost and the capacity, so trucking capacity has increased, things in trucking in general have improved over the past couple of months. There was some figure I saw, there was about 13,000 truck drivers hired nationally last month. But beyond that, of course, the fuel surcharges are going to keep things up. But if you also look from a trucking perspective, just like everything else in the supply chain, there are 250,000 trucks on order. Truck manufacturers have stopped taking orders for trucks. They have a 2-year backlog of trucks. If you look in the logistics industry, forklifts, you want to buy a forklift, right? It's anywhere from 40 weeks to 2 years. 40 weeks for Raymond and up to 2 years to get a Crown forklift and everywhere in between. And the strategy of the material handling equipment dealers at this point is to just give you a 40-week guarantee to get a PO in their hands, and they'll adjust the timing and potentially the pricing as actual deliveries made. I know that some of you who are manufacturers are having to deal with the same issues in terms of commitments that you've made with your customers and price adjustments and things of that nature. Anyway, it's a difficult dynamic market. I threw this slide out here because I found it's interesting. It talks about both the technology trends and the social and business trends around the supply chain. The things to the right are technology trends. The higher up on the scale on the right, the more disruptive those sort of technologies can be to existing. They can be disruptive. So if you look at like self-driving vehicles, that sort of thing, autonomous vehicles, which are coming forward. That is coming. There are tests going on this summer with FedEx Ground. There's already autonomous vehicles autonomous trucks driving between Houston and Dallas, and particularly across the Midwest. Of course, 3D printing, and then UAVs, like the delivery of packages using drones, things of that nature. Those are all high up on the right, and of course, there's a number of things high up on the left. But it's just kind of an interesting, maybe more academic slide in terms of the technologies and things that are out there that are trending in the supply chain. So with all that said, at this point, I'm going to transition into e-commerce, but I want to see if there's anybody out there that has any questions or any comments in particular about the initial data that was shared with relation to kind of the shipping industry or the trucking industry.
On trucking, I have a question that I probably don't know enough to ask, but I've read that the autonomous trucks are pretty good on the freeways where there's straight runs. But once they get into the tighter areas of infrastructure, which we get from the manufacturer to a distributor, they have trouble. Are they talking at all about having hubs close to freeways that would be transitions to take care of that problem for autonomous trucks?
I think it's more a matter of point to point across like the Midwest, across open areas. And, recognizing that the setup of those sort of hubs may be like at state lines or outside of populated areas in which they have drop yards, and then it, transition that autonomous truck. And also remember that that sort of regulation is on a state by state basis. And so, I don't know that you'd ever have the state of California might, be a little slow in that. Although there's autonomous vehicles driving around in downtown San Francisco right now. And so that's on a car front. But the technology is coming forward, and it's just a question of time before it becomes more prevalent. But you should see that more in play by the end of this decade. But certainly point to point across the Midwest, a big opportunity from that perspective. Does anybody else have any other question related to any of those?
Yeah, I do. Can you? I understand that prices of transportation have just gone wild. We all understand that. Of
Yep.
course, diesel's gone up, et cetera. And I should know this question, but do you happen to know what, say, an average cost per pound or per product of the transportation is? What
Yeah,
percentage?
I couldn't share that with you. I don't have that information simply because I'm not a shipper,
Okay.
and I don't manage the transportation department. And that's all gonna kind of be unique from company to company based on the nature of your commodity and what you're shipping, whether it's,
Yeah.
really heavy steel or whether it's potato chips, right? In terms of kind of how it weighs out, how it cubes out, and that sort of thing. And then, of course, your leverage as a individual shipper, whether you're a small, medium, or large shipper, to be able to negotiate, kind of volume discounts, the amount of volume you're shipping, and those sort of things.
Yeah.
They all come to bear on that kind of cost question.
Yeah, of course. And I guess my question is motivated a little bit by the idea that there's a semi-hysteria out there, particularly by the press, uh, about really how much the costs have gone up and what they have done to, say, inflation.
Sure.
I mean, it's been a long time since I have kept track of individual shipments at the retail level, for instance, but our transportation costs were 1 or 2%. I know it's a lot higher for steel,
Sure.
and it's a lot higher in our business in plastics because plastic, blown plastic products don't weigh very much
Right.
per cubic foot.
You cube out before you weigh
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously that's an issue, but it just feels to me like this is being overblown. If as transportation, I'm just thinking. Tell me if this seems right. If our cost of transportation doubles, that probably shouldn't increase the overall price of a typical item in the store by more than 1% or 2 or 3, because it's not that big of the total cost component cost of a delivered product.
Sure.
But it makes it sound like, oh my gosh, this is the only problem we have, and it's not. It's really the cost of materials that's driving us crazy.
Sure. Sure. And it's
It's
across the board, and it's a supply and demand issue.
yeah.
You look like as a manufacturer who's making something that takes 100 components and you only have 98 of them. Guess what? You can't make more. Until you get that 99th and 100th component to finish that good. And in general, with the injection of all that money into the economy, there's significant demand out there. Particularly the 1.9 trillion dollars that was put into the economy in March of last year, or beginning of March of last year. It takes a long time for it to get in. That's helping to fuel the inflation that's out there, and in general, just consumer demand.
Yeah.
So
Well, that's another one that I haven't really seen very much about, and kind of ties into my second question, which really has to do with this huge percentage of increase that you showed on the map of the shipping. And if you have a 25% increase in offloading of shipments, and I don't know what the percentage of our imports is right now, but it's a little bit hard to see that the country really absorbed that. If our economy is running at 2, 3, 4, say it's even 6%, of course it's not anymore, and it's never been there for years. Where does all this stuff go? We're seeing these huge numbers of changes, and the one number that does strike me is that we've got in Southern California, we have 98% occupancy of warehouses. I'm talking about the space on the floor. So if that's the case, is it just going into a warehouse?
well, let me kind of move through my presentation a little bit. So I have
Go
some
ahead.
other data related that's driving the inflation cost, the
Great.
inflation issue,
Yeah.
both on the employment front, on the warehousing front, and things of that nature, which might help shed light on some of that.
Great.
At any rate, this is a graph. This is kind of pre-COVID, and this was the growth of e-commerce as it increased. And the percents that you see through the middle of the bar charts are a percent of U.S. retail goods, percent of total U.S. retail sales. So if you look like what was forecast in 2020 on the far right, 13%, or about 1 out of every 8 items was being shipped via e-commerce. And then you look at the delta of the difference between 2019 and 2020 on the right. The amount is 607 billion versus 692 billion. You're basically looking at an $85 billion jump. The challenge for the people in the logistics sector is that traditional logistics is done a carton at a time or a pallet at a time, where e-commerce is done an each at a time. It's much more labor intensive, and it requires a higher level of sophistication from a technology and an automated equipment and systems perspective. So in order to kind of turn that quickly and get it to the consumer to meet the consumer needs, that ever increasing amount of e-commerce is putting a lot of pressure on logistics operators, and having logistics operators having to change strategy and again adopt automated equipment and systems, and quite possibly and quite frankly upgrading the skill set that's needed in today's modern logistics world in the technician space. So that's where it was forecast. That's where it was headed. And then what happened in the first quarter of 2020 was, of course, that huge spike. It was about a 40% growth year over traditional. And the reality is that, as you all know, who run businesses, just because your business spikes, 30 or 40%, you all of a sudden, again, don't have more people, you don't have more equipment, you don't have more inventory, you don't have more capacity, and you have to do everything you can to adjust to meet that. So when a trend changes that quickly, it takes business a while to adjust. And of course, this reshaped the supply chain in a lot of ways. And then this is the flip side of that. So this one was what happened in that quarter. This was a slow upslope, gradual upslope that was occurring, that was planned, that logistics operators could anticipate. And then this is how it's kind of leveled off. So you see the high spike, which is that first and second quarter of 2020. But the bottom line is that e-commerce is about 19 or 20% of total U.S. retail sales now. Prior to COVID, it was 12 or 13%. That's still a significant jump. But in the meantime, industry and retailers have had a chance to adjust. So here's one example of that impact with that spike that occurred. This was the package handling industry. And again, just because you have in this case, there's a daily demand to ship about 86 million packages a day as it approached the holiday season, and the total U.S. capacity was 79 million. And that would be UPS, FedEx Ground, USPS, and Amazon Logistics. And don't forget about Amazon Logistics. I'll show you something about that a little bit later. But at any rate, the two bar charts, the dark one was demand per day, and the smaller one was capacity per day. Well, how do these package companies deal with that? You can extend shifts, you can extend weekend, but you're running around the clock, and that's why that we're experiencing delays, and people are getting their packages for Christmas late and all that kind of stuff. But again, in the meantime, companies are looking at, like, how do we add capacity? How do we plan for this going forward as a company? How can we adjust? And so this data right here actually comes back from a year about 2016, and I saw a presentation CB Richard Ellis did on how e-commerce was reshaping the supply chain itself. You began at that juncture to see significant numbers of closures of bricks and mortar retailers, numbering 5,000 a year, 7,000 a year. I think in 2019 it was 8 or 9 or 10 or 12,000 a year. But at any rate, kind of what was happening, because their models, their traditional predictive models about how much needs to be built, were really thrown off. So they came up with this calculation, and based on what happened in the market, it said for every $1 billion in additional e-commerce sales, that's the pivot from traditional retail to e-com, there's a demand for between 1.25 and 1.5 million square feet of additional warehouse space. That's over and above what is forecasted, over and above normal, for normal GDP growth, for normal business growth. And so in that case, you look at that $85 billion jump that was year over year that was anticipated in 2020. You're talking about adding about 110 million extra square feet across the US. But when you look at that spike, growing from about what was about 13% to about 19%, that's significant. And it's all of a sudden, and that's where the space constrained issue originates. Like, there's not enough space. And what else companies have done as a result of COVID? It used to be just-in-time inventory. It used to be about, make to order, right? Manufacturers making to order. It transitioned from just-in-time inventory to just-in-case inventory. And that's also what's putting pressure on the market. So this is a slide I also picked up very recently, and it shows the amount of industrial warehouse space that's under development in the US now. So recognize that that initial data set was 18 to 24 months old. This is now. This is 2022, okay? And if you look at that little descriptor in the middle in the small print, there's about 750 million square feet of industrial space under construction in the US. And last year they built over 500,000, where traditionally it was 250 million to 250 to 300 million. It's off the charts. It's beyond anything ever that's ever occurred in the history of industrial space. Again, it's a transition of what was traditional retail, bricks and mortar retail, into today's automated logistics environment, into the fulfillment environment, putting pressure on, of course, warehouse space, space that manufacturers have to lease, that things of that nature. What's notable are three things here. In the upper left corner, Phoenix. Who would have ever thought Phoenix was becoming a logistics hub? There's 37 million square feet under development in Phoenix, which represents about 16% of the total market, meaning their market's about 6 times larger than that. But if you look below at Dallas Fort Worth, below that, the large bubble, there's almost 73 million square feet of warehouse space under construction in Dallas at this point. And so that is phenomenal. It's just like the Inland Empire is nothing compared to that. And then if you go all the way to the right, the larger bubble says Southern California. That's broader Southern California. In that number is about 30 million square feet under construction in the Inland Empire. So we talked a moment ago about vacancy rates, and this particular chart right here, upper left corner, is what you need to pay attention to. This is the vacancy rate for all of Southern California at 1.6%, but in the Inland Empire, it's sub 1%. BJ Patterson mentioned that a month ago. So it's about 0.8 or 0.9. Basically, there's no space, right? And what does that do when there's no space? And this is to the inflation point, and that's to the inflation question. In Southern California, is the highest markup of commercial real estate pricing for cost per square foot leased, 18.8% growth year over year. That's quite astounding. That's making things difficult. And of course, adding that permanent inflationary cost to all goods. Okay, and then this is just a little anecdotal thing that I've thrown in because it's quite impactful. You know, everything that Amazon was doing during COVID, Amazon added 138 million square feet of warehouse space in the US in 2021. Okay. In 46 years, Walmart built, as a total company, built 144 million square feet of warehouse space. So Amazon built about the size of a Walmart distribution network in 1 year. Okay. And that doesn't include mezzanine and multi-level space. In 2020, through Amazon Logistics, right, the little trucks that run around our neighborhoods all over the place. All of a sudden, Amazon, they started this Amazon Logistics in 2012. When 2020, they shipped 4.2 billion packages themselves for their own goods. And they're moving now into actually handling goods for networks outside of Amazon Logistics. Okay, it'll be in excess of 6 billion this past year, and UPS shipped 4.9 billion. So Amazon Logistics is basically as large as UPS. And they did all of that from 2012 till now. Amazon, UPS is about a 105-year-old company. And then, of course, 1 out of every 153 working people in the US works for Amazon now. And during COVID, during that crazy 2020 year, when everything was coming off the hook, Amazon added 500,000 workers in the US. That's quite astounding to think about, adding 10,000 people a week during COVID. And so the more people employed by Amazon than the entire residential construction industry. The workforce development boards need to take note of that in terms of where they focus their efforts. And then, of course, the movement toward automation, automated equipment and systems. A lot of people aren't familiar with it. These are examples of different sorts of technologies that are in place in today's modern logistics world. And you have AGV systems, automated storage and retrieval systems, shuttle systems, which are robotic, goods to person systems, auto pick, conveyor systems, sortation systems, and all this sort of equipment is in today's modern logistics building. You know, there's investments inside these buildings anywhere from a couple of $1 million to a simple building to upwards of $50 million or more. There's a number of operations that are being built in the Inland Empire at this time and have been built, which have the next generation warehouse equipment in it and a lot of robotics. So I just threw this in here also for kind of a little fun thing in terms of trends and warehouse trends. There's a whole trend toward what is called micro fulfillment or new concepts as land gets more valuable. So you got your land, you got your square footage, your footprint of your land, but then of course you're looking to go up now, like multi-level, multi-storage. And so the one on the left is kind of the example of a kind of a two-story distribution center with a truck ramp and trucks actually backing into the warehouse from the upper level with the whole lower level for parking for staff and that sort of thing. And then the one on the right is literally like trucks entering below, parking for employees, automated systems at the third level, inventory storage all over. And these sort of concepts are what logistics companies are looking at now. And then the whole trend toward micro fulfillment is an emerging trend. I felt it was worth on touching upon today because Deborah Smith asked me to touch on trends and supply chain trends. And it's the movement of logistics and supply chain into the urban environment. Warehouse or footprints that are 50,000 square foot or less. They have high moving items. They're either standalone or they're attached to existing retailers. Walmart had made an announcement. They're adding 100 in 100 of their locations. They're adding bolt-on automated fulfillment operations at their given retail store locations in the U.S. But it's for same-day delivery. It's for pickup and it's for click and collect pickup for both grocery and consumer goods. And so here's the trend right here. So that's kind of an overview of what it is. Here's the trend. 2021, there were about 81 of those were built in the U.S. and used in the U.S. But you see the trend going forward from micro fulfillment, automated micro fulfillment, and again the higher level of skill that's needed from the technician to keep these fulfillment centers operational. But they're forecasted to be about 7,300 of them built in the year 2030. And then, of course, there was the big discussion about why are supply chains so strung out. And here's a chart that speaks to that a little bit. And I heard a comment earlier about the kind of nearshoring, which is the Mexico thing, Mexico and Canada. And this is reshoring into the U.S. This is jobs on the blue line, jobs and FDI's foreign direct investment. But of course, it's beginning to happen. But companies are more looking at doing it's supply chain. The word chain, like if you break one chain, one link in the chain, your supply chain's broken. It's more toward a supply web now. Think of a spider web and a central and companies sourcing things from multiple locations. And then the other part of that, as it relates to, oh boy, I lost my train of thinking there, and I will go on. Anyway, job openings. So this is the other inflationary piece to touch on the questions of inflation. So there were 11.3 million jobs open in the U.S. That would have been March. I think the April number came out at 11.5 million. There's a discrepancy of about 5 million jobs between people looking for jobs and the actual jobs that exist. And one of the prominent sectors, of course, transportation, logistics, manufacturing. And so that is a big challenge in general, and that is what's driving wage pressure. That is what has caused the year-over-year increase of 5.6% in wages across the U.S. And on top of that, additional benefits and things of that nature. You look at here's a little bit of a statistic about kind of the amount of warehouse jobs in the U.S. that have been posted in varying states on the left, and then by company on the right since 2015. But that's just a kind of high level anecdotal data. But on the right is the important chart to pay attention to. These are entry level warehouse jobs, okay, based on jobs posted across the U.S. Mind you, California is going to be more expensive. Parts of the Midwest might be less expensive. But at any rate, the entry level warehouse job, which is fully benefited, and it starts around $17 an hour across the U.S. and in the Inland Empire, it's about $18 for a warehouse worker. That does not include temp labor, but it's quite interesting and impactful piece there. And then it's just this metric in general is there's 0.6 people for every job that exists. And what this is doing is it's putting pressure on employers. The old metric used to be return on investment or ROI, like the CFO in terms of justifying employment training programs or partnership programs or things to do to upskill workers or recruit workers. It was all in the CFO's office. It is now transitioned. It's now transitioned to one of business continuity, where if we don't take these steps, if we're not collaborative, if we're not creative internally, if we're not working on upskilling our own workforce and looking at that internally, we are going to fall behind and we're no longer going to be relevant. And this is just a basic skills gap number. This is actually from 2018, and this relates to manufacturing in general. There's a huge skill gap, as I think everybody here is aware of, to service the manufacturing sector. And 53% of those positions they need, there's people that aren't skilled to do them. And basically, there's a need for workforce training programs tailored to the manufacturing industry. I know that's part of what's happening up in the high desert tomorrow. And so this transitions a little bit into my work, and that I'm doing work with the Manufacturing Skill Standards Council. And it's the only national certified body accredited under ISO 17024, which is the highest standard for certification, personal certification. And I know manufacturers are familiar with ISO and recognized by the Department of Defense, Department of Labor. And there's MSSC programs in prison systems, in the military, working with adult centers, workforce investment boards, technical colleges, community colleges. And there's at this juncture over 200,000 credentials issued nationwide. And this is just a high level footprint of where MSSC's at in terms of certifications issued. The darker the color, the stronger the representation in the state. And then just as I threw this in there, because you guys are manufacturers, and MSSC was founded around the Certified Production Technician Certification Program involving safety, quality practices, production, and maintenance awareness. And about 600 companies were involved in creating that certification under the National Skills Standards Act from the Clinton administration, and specifically tailored to manufacturers. MSSC is NAM endorsed and is part of their overall certification, stackable certification system. And then there's a couple easier certifications in the logistics space, but each one of the modules in the certified production technician space take about 40 hours each, and the whole certification is around 160 hours. So with that said, MSSC also has an alliance with FANUC, and MSSC CPT, Certified Production Technician, is crosswalk with FANUC, and is a foundational skill, provides foundational skills for the next step up, which is into a FANUC Robotics Operator 1 or Rockwell Automation PLC Operator. So that was a ton of data. I put a lot of time and energy putting that together. I know it's a lot to absorb, but with that said, I see if I have about 5 minutes for questions. They asked me to go on for about 35 to 40 minutes. So.
Will you share that PowerPoint with us so we can have the data? Would that be something we could post at the MCIE website?
Yeah, and so I had emailed a link to the presentation to Vincent.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah, okay. So did I drone on too much? Was that too crazy all over the place? You know,
Steve, you didn't.
Yeah.
You did not. Tell me if you know if there's an appetite within the logistics industry for an apprenticeship type approach to employment. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it does. So I'm involved. So as part of my introduction, Molly had mentioned that I was involved with the development of what is a certified technician supply chain automation program as part of my work as a result of the 9 years I spent with the National Center for Supply Chain Automation. And there's a apprenticeship pilot program that we ran out of a target location in Fontana that has been successful and is getting scaled, and it's around the technician occupation. 2 years into it, there's 53 technicians that are enrolled in that. And they do 20 hours of classroom and 20 hours of on-the-job training. That's job shadowed, and they've had immense success with it to the extent that Target has rolled it out nationwide and has invested $3 million in capital and $11 million in operating budget to upskill their technicians. The point I made earlier about the shift from ROI to business continuity, if you don't have the talent, you either have to be developing it internally or form collaborative in parallel, form collaborative partnerships with like Chafee Intech, workforce investment boards, Victor Valley College, things of that nature. You have to be doing it on multiple fronts and looking to upskill your existing workforce for key positions. Hiring that in and stealing it from everybody else by paying more wages is not a good strategy. So
that sounds like really good advice. You may know that the Launch Apprenticeship Network is keyed into the Target arrangement.
Yes.
Do you know if Walmart or Amazon are considering an apprenticeship approach, or are
So
they doing something different?
So not at this juncture. So what happened is we incubated this, and I work with Charles Henkel's End Launch. Okay,
Good.
and they're the ones who steered this. He without Charles this wouldn't have happened. And so with that said, we piloted it internally at Target initially because of COVID. We would have preferred to done it externally at a school, right? The next step is there's a cohort underway supposed to be starting up in June of this next month,
Yeah.
involving an external. And initially, it's focused on Target, but beyond that, it's the opportunity once it goes external to be able to walk other people in and one company at a time and show them the nature of the program. And working on something similar with Moreno Valley College and Bakersfield College in Central Valley. So I've got a number of things underway there, and it takes a long time to move the needle on that front.
I have a
Really
question
appreciate
for
the
you.
input.
Thank you, Tom.
Steve, I have a question for you.
Sure,
the
John.
Amount of volume of the trucks that are moving product through Southern California right now, it just seems phenomenal to me. I've seen it grow over the last 3 or 4 years. And your numbers that you presented are very interesting. I appreciate what you've done. But I'm just curious, do you think Southern California is going to be able to keep up with the infrastructure for the freeways and any of our infrastructure? Is it going to be able to maintain that growth as we move forward here? Or, as they build more warehouses in the Inland Empire, how are they going to be able to transport all that product into the
And
Inland
that's an interesting question in general, and that's been one that the Inland Empire in general has been looking at for 20 years. I mean, you have to remember when they had the Alameda Corridor issue, right? When those at dock trains were stopping up cities in Ontario at Milliken there and right off the freeway. That's a challenge ongoing. Recognize about a third of what enters the ports goes to serve Southern California. About a third of it's put into mixing facilities, as I would term them, where they're loaded up. You can take 5 containers of 40-foot containers and put them into 3 53-foot, 110-inch tall trailers. And that's why logistics is so big here. And then the other third is put on on-dock rail and shipped out of the state. But I don't know if there's any real easy answer to the infrastructure issue, from a political perspective. I mean, it's continuing to grow, population serving and things of that nature. So, that's a bigger question. You have to remember, for every dollar of federal gasoline tax that California takes in, it only receives back 92 cents. Yet we receive 40% of all of the goods that enter the U.S. through our ports and our infrastructure and that sort of thing. So pretty interesting. But anyway, sorry I couldn't be more helpful on that, John. Any others?
Steve, are you willing to sort of put yourself out here on a limb? We're seeing people forecasting what may be happening this summer in terms of trucking and shipping and diesel fuel, et cetera. We're supposedly going to be out of diesel, or there'll be shortages of diesel on the 2 coasts, and that just rings of like some kind of a disaster. Do you see us having some additional interruptions in just simply transportation? Are we going to have a slow improvement, or is it going to be choppy? What would you guess we're looking at for 4 months out?
Yeah, and so with regard to the diesel fuel crisis, I don't per se see, when prices go up, people will figure things out, right? There's more margin. Your money drives people to be creative. So I think that that's happening. And of course, the other side of things is the Federal Reserve Board. And it was Jerome Powell that spoke yesterday, said that they're going to do what they need to do to begin to try to get inflation in check. At their next meeting, which is in 4 weeks from now, they're going to increase rates another 0.5%. And 6 weeks after that, probably another 0.5%. So they want to use increase interest rates to be able to kind of tame that and maybe potentially slow down the economy from that perspective. So I think that's happening and that's out there. But who said, who knows? It's kind of crystal ball sort of thing. But I think on the diesel outage issue, I think that people will figure that out. It's unfortunate that in the state of California in over 40 years, we have not built an additional refinery, and that our refineries process Brent crude. We do not process West Texas Intermediate or WTI. And so it would just be impossible for them to apply to be able to adapt their refineries. the refiners to be able to process WTI, but so we have to rely on Brent. And you know what? Brent comes internationally. That's what the irony of all this is. So anyway, those are just some comments I have on that.
Okay. Well, it'd be interesting if, with all the freight that we're receiving in the ports, it'd be interesting if we didn't have enough diesel to get it out of the state, wouldn't it?
Yeah, right. Go on rail, right?
Yeah.
You'd have to. So, anybody else?
Steve, I had a quick question. You mentioned earlier that the workforce investment development group should look pretty carefully at the fact that apparently, I don't know if you were saying this, there's a lot of competition for workers in construction and transportation and manufacturing. And that's something the Manufacturers Council is very concerned about. All our manufacturers are having a hard time hiring. Where do you think the highest competition is? Transportation?
So my comment on that when I touch on the workforce investment boards. So the traditional academic system of 2 years and 4-year degrees and waiting for people and waiting on a semester-based system doesn't fit. Okay. It is quick, not for credit training, specifically tailored to meet industry needs to help those people fill those jobs quickly. And you got to look at non-traditional employment sources. You have to look at second chance populations. You have to look to transition people more quickly from the unemployment roles in. And that's why I touched on the MSSC piece at the end, kind of high quality certification programs that are industry recognized, nationally validated, that can help people transition quickly. 4-week programs, 6-week programs, 8-week programs. This target program is 7.5 months long, but that's a different ball game. But if you did that through the schools, it would be years. So upskilling somebody like that it takes a bit. It's a lot to learn. But that's my comment on workforce investment boards, and then also in terms of kind of an industry sector perspective, from a strategic, when they develop their strategy, of course, making sure that part of their funding is directed in support of the manufacturing and logistics sector. And that's true in San Bernardino County. So that's my comment there.
Any other questions?
Well, I'll ask somewhat of a trivial question on your map of transportation time. I noticed that San Francisco doesn't seem to be shipping anything to New York.
Yeah.
Is that really true, or is that just kind of an oversight?
So that would be, well, I just picked that up from a piece of research that CB Richard Ellis did, and I think it has to do with it's the rail lines, Ron.
Yeah.
There's no rail infrastructure to do that per se from San Francisco in an efficient manner.
Yeah.
Right. That's days. Again, it's time.
If that was the case, I mean, that makes us a lot more important down here.
Yes.
We've already got the rails that are working. It's a straight shot. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Thanks.
Yep, of course. Okay. Well, thanks for the opportunity. I put a lot of thought and a lot of time and energy into that slide deck, but I'm actually using it. I'm presenting at WorkCon next week, which is a workforce board conference down in San Diego. So, that data's my objective is to educate workforce board members about what's happening in the sector in terms of hoping to get funding pointed toward helping, folks like yourselves. So
It's excellent work, Steve. Really good.
We
Thank you.
really appreciate you being here today, Steve. Thank you so much. And remember, everybody, you can share this video of this meeting with your coworkers or other manufacturers after Monday afternoon. We'll have it posted at our website, mfgcouncilie.com. And we want to thank CMTC again for their great support. And reminder, we hope to see you next month on Thursday, June 23rd. Have a great evening, everybody. And you can stick around and talk if you want to. You don't have to leave.
I'm looking to connect with CMTC in general. I see there's somebody from how do you say it? Rocio?
Hi, this
Hi.
is Lucille. Happy to
Rocio.
be joining you.